Hey there, Braves fans. Welcome to another edition of State of the Braves. I'm your host, George McNair. Guys, the Braves have had a good run of things lately. Unfortunately, their winning streak came to an end at 7 games as they fall in the final game of the series with the Washington Nationals. But all it feels pretty right with the Braves right now. Not everything. I'm going to get into that here in a little bit, but the Braves have nonetheless won 8 of their last 10 games. They have a 7-game winning streak in the middle of that. Again, they do fall in the last game against the Nationals, but do take 2 out of 3 in that series after sweeping the Mets. So coming out of that series, the Braves currently sit 3.5 games ahead of Miami, 8 games ahead of Philly, and a very robust 9.5 games ahead of the New York Mets. So let me do a quick series recap. I'm not really going to do much news because there isn't a lot of news coming out right now for the Braves. So I'm just going to go directly in to a recap of this Nationals series. And then I want to talk a little bit about Marcell Ozuna. And then we're going to get into the All-Star game. And I'm going to give you my picks. And then I'm going to give you, it came out today, where everybody stands in terms of voting. So that's going to be kind of interesting. It's always cool to see where the Braves stand, and especially when the Braves are as good as they are with the best record in the National League, you want to see several Braves near the top of that list, and we do have several, so that's good news as well. So the National Series, you're coming off this high, this rush, adrenaline rush of the Mets series, and especially that final game, the walk-off Ozzie Albies 3-run homer in that marathon game that was probably the coolest game of the year. So you're coming off of that, and the Braves did look maybe a little flat in this series against Washington. You're playing not as good of a team, and the offense was, honestly, has been so good against the Mets and really quite good in the previous series against the D-backs as well. Just not quite on par against the Nationals. Still had a couple good moments. And honestly, game one, they were just simply able to do just enough to get the win. So game one was the debut, at least the debut in terms of a starting rotation spot for A.J. Smith-Shawver. We had seen him briefly in Arizona in 2 1/3 innings. He had been quite impressive with a fastball near 96, 97 miles an hour. One thing that I did take note of in this debut start for him was his fastball velocity was a little down. He was more around 92, 93. So that's going to be something I'm not concerned about, but I'm going to continue to watch that as he makes other starts. I don't know if that was a tick down because he was trying to locate and he was really focused on doing that, or what. This guy's 20 years old, so I'm going to expect some wider swings in performance and velocity in a lot of different ways when he's on the mound from start to start. In many ways, he's still just figuring out what kind of pitcher he is. I can imagine his mechanics aren't incredibly consistent. And so that was just kind of interesting. We saw him again in the minors. He has averaged, I think, 96.5 miles an hour on his fastball. So seeing fastballs 91, 92, 93 for most of the game was a little odd. He did look a little more hittable, though he didn't he didn't blow up in that game. The Nationals do score 2 runs in 5 1/3 innings off of Smith-Shawver, excuse me, but they were both unearned runs, a couple of errors going on in his start. So he limits major damage. He leaves the game down, but nonetheless, the Braves right in it. The Braves end up coming back for an amazing 5th game in a row. This wasn't a huge comeback, but a comeback nonetheless. They get 2 in the 8th inning without a ball leaving the infield, and they win the game 3-2 against the Nationals. It was not the prettiest win. Honestly, it was a pretty boring game in a lot of ways. It seemed like the offense didn't have a hard hit ball all game long. A ton of soft singles and infield singles and that sort of thing, but they still get the win. So you are certainly happy with that. Now in game 2, the Braves get 2 early inning 2-run home runs off the bats of Acuna and Ozuna. And that was especially Acuna's home run was just like a laser beam to right field. And Ozuna, again, has just been hitting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about him in this podcast, but he keeps doing it. So you get 4 early runs off of those 2 swings. Jared Schuster started this game. He was not super sharp. Very weird start, quite honestly. He has no strikeouts. His stuff, wasn't really fooling anyone. He had some, balls that were hit pretty hard against him, and yet he's able to survive enough to get through about 5 innings and qualified for the win. The Braves hold on to a win in Game 2. And then Game 3, Elder gives up 5 earned runs and 8 hits in 5 1/3 innings. This was maybe his worst start of the season. He was actually cruising pretty good through 5, and then in the 6th inning he stalled out. And the home run he gave up, I mean, it hit the top of the wall. There was a couple things there that you just like, man, if 1 or 2 things had gone the other way, he probably gets through that 6th inning, comes out, and who knows, maybe the Braves win this game. But everything kind of turned bad in the 6th inning, and unfortunately, the Braves lose Game 3. You do have a massive home run off the bat of Matt Olson in the 1st inning, but Game 2 and Game 3 were a little bit like the Braves had been playing previously, where they score early, you get a couple home runs early in Game 2, you get a big home run early in Game 3, and then the bats, for the most part, go silent. And that definitely happened in Game 3. No runs scored for the Braves after the 1st inning. They did have a lot of bad luck, terrible luck off the bat in this game. You had some laser shots from Acuna and Harris, especially. Michael Harris, man, I just feel like his luck on hard hit balls this year has just been ridiculous. But he had 2 balls that the last one went right off the pitcher, and he was still able to pick it up and get Harris out. And you're just like, man, he just cannot catch a break. But he's still looking better. I'm very encouraged by Michael Harris, and I think he's set for a pretty big last, I don't know however many games we have left, 90 games or so. So, and of course, you're not worried about Acuna, but you have those games. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I feel like the Braves are the unluckiest team around, and maybe that's just because I'm a Braves fan and I look at things through those, colored glasses. But I do think there's something to it, because it comes across that way, at least, because the Braves hit the ball so hard. There's a lot of stats that back up they basically hit the ball harder than pretty much any team in the major leagues. And so when they have these line drive shots that are just right to somebody, you're just like, daggone it. I mean, that's so unlucky. And then other teams hit the ball softer a lot. And so other teams seem to have a lot more bloop hits, infield hits, that sort of thing that will just drop, and you just roll your eyes at it. The Braves don't tend to have those types of hit as much. I mean, they get some, but it just seems like there are certain games the Braves play where everything falls right for the other team, and the Braves can't catch a break. And it felt like that in Game 3 against the Nationals. Nonetheless, it's hard to complain too much. The Braves, this 3rd game of the series breaks a really nice winning streak the Braves were on, and hopefully as the Braves turn to Detroit, they're going to start a new winning streak here tonight. Despite this really good run, again, the Braves have won about, well, what is it? It's 8 out of 10 games. But one thing I will point out, not to be too much of a downer here, but the starting rotation has not looked very good over those 10 games. So the last quality start from the Braves, and again, quality start is you go at least 6 innings pitched with 3 earned runs or less. Okay, so the last quality start from the Braves came from Spencer Strider on June 3rd. So that means the Braves have gone 7 games straight of non-quality starts. And it's pretty funny that, they win 6 of those games. Because the offense and bullpen have been so good, right? So you have some bad starting performances. This is what has set up all of these comeback wins. The offense has continued to roll, and the bullpen has held its ground. and the Braves have won a lot of games that way. I'm not sure that's the best way to continue to do things, and obviously you want your starters to be shut down. Charlie Morton is going tonight, Monday night, against Detroit, and it would be awesome to see him bounce back. He's been around a 5 ERA over his last 3 starts total, so he has not been super sharp after being quite good before that. So guys, the Braves played the Nationals this week. I'm in the Nationals area, so I get blacked out when this happens. It's always very frustrating. So I have basically 2 options, and we could talk about how dumb the baseball blackout restriction policy is. But I can either wait until after the games are done, and then about 2 hours later, I can go on the MLB app and watch the game as it's been loaded and recorded there, and I can listen to the Braves broadcast, or I can kind of do a workaround and watch locally. But that means I have to listen to the Nationals broadcast, which I'm sure those are really nice guys, but the Nationals broadcast, I think, is just about the worst in baseball. It's not good. So what I ended up doing, at least in 2 of the 3 games, is I watched live, but I muted the Nationals broadcast and I listened to the Braves radio. And I will say, guys, obviously radio is not one that probably many of you often listen to in terms of the Braves, but I really do appreciate the Braves radio broadcast. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to recognize those guys. I enjoyed it. I think those guys are actually, they've got, a good rapport with each other. So this is Joe Simpson and Ben Ingram, and I think these are the 2 primary guys that do Braves games. Of course, Joe Simpson pretty much every game, and Ben Ingram for the most part. And I think they're good. They're a good team. And if you get a chance, especially if you are away and you can't watch a game, just finding them and listening to them on the radio is pretty cool. So I wanted to shout out to them. Of course, Joe Simpson has been with the Braves since 1992. Can y'all believe that? If you're around my age, you will remember a young Joe Simpson with some of the older guys in the booth. Of course, he is the last of the great foursome from TBS, Skip, Pete, Don, and Joe all together. Joe Simpson is a Braves Hall of Famer. All 4 of those guys have been put into the Braves Hall of Fame. So, it's one of those things that he almost gets forgotten because he was on TV for so long. The Braves kind of relegated him to radio. And, I think trying to get younger in the booth. And I really like Frank Core and the other guys they have in the booth now. But I do miss Joe a little bit. Some people don't like Joe Simpson. They think he's a little curmudgeonly. He's the old guy, old school way, that sort of thing. But I really appreciate the guy. I think, I might disagree with his take some, but I think he brings a good sense of humor. And I particularly have a lot of fond memories of him and Skip going back and forth in the booth together. So I'm glad he's continuing to do Braves games. Then Ben Ingram is kind of new to the Braves within the last few years. He stepped up into a larger role in 2021, but I think he has really good chemistry with Joe. He's comes across as a super nice guy, really solid, and a good grasp of the game, feel for the game. And, on radio, it's a little different because obviously people can't see what they're talking about. So they have to be a little more descriptive and colorful in how they call the game. And I think they do a really good job of that. If you want to get a little bit more Ben Ingram, if you're not necessarily into listening on the radio, there is one thing I found on YouTube. It's called Riding with the Braves. This is something that the Braves have put out with, I think it's like Chevrolet. I don't even know that they're doing it this season, but there's some really good, over the last 3 seasons, some really good long-form interviews that Ben Ingram has done with some of the Braves. Ron Washington and is a really good one. You can watch that. He's done one with Spencer Strider with quite a few of the Braves. So if you're looking for some more Braves content, check that out. And you also get a little better feel for Ben Ingram. So definitely wanted to shout out those guys a little bit. All right, so let's get back to on the field stuff and talk about Marcell Ozuna. You guys, I brought up Ozuna as much as probably any player, and not always for good reasons. right? In the offseason, I was calling for the Braves to trade or release Ozuna. I was kind of done with him. And then Ozuna, of course, had about the worst April in the history of baseball. I might be, going a little far with that, but I don't know, maybe not. It was pretty horrendous. So, but I do, of course, Ozuna's had a remarkable bounce back, and I give him a lot of credit for that. It's not easy. He could have just tanked and been relegated to the basement of Truist Park if he had not turned things around when he did. But by the end of April, Ozuna's numbers, he was at 091 with a 206 on base percentage and a 218 slugging percentage. It's hard to do that. That's how bad he was. He was basically the worst offensive player in baseball at the end of April. But since then, Ozuna has played in 32 games, and he has hit about 333, he has around a 380 on-base percentage, and this is maybe the most remarkable, about a 600 slugging percentage, which is elite. And so that includes 11 home runs and 27 RBIs in just 32 games. Basically, Ozuna has been maybe just behind Acuna, the Braves' best offensive player since the start of May. And this has brought his totals up very impressively for as low as he was. His totals today, he's batting .242 with a .318 on base and a .494 slugging percentage. So again, anytime a hitter can get that number over or around 500 slugging percentage, is really, really good. So he's done that. And of course, now he's at 13 home runs. I think he's around 30 RBIs. And he's just totally turned his season around. And on top of that, there's some really positive stories about him in the clubhouse. There was a recent story, you may have seen it, where Michael Harris gave him a lot of credit for some leadership and encouragement in the clubhouse, in the dugout, basically telling Harris, hey, you're the best center fielder in baseball. Just forget everything. Forget your struggles before this. Just go out and let your season start today. And that was right before Harris had the 3-hit game, had the home run, 3 RBIs in that Mets series. So, we're still hoping Harris is turning it around. Jury's still out maybe a little bit on that, though I'm really positive that he is starting to turn it around. And it's cool to hear those stories because Ozuna, obviously, there's a lot of negatives to him off the field, but it does seem like on the field and in the clubhouse, he's actually contributing a lot. I think this is one of the big reasons, as me and other people have been calling for Ozuna to be traded or released. I think it's one of the reasons that the Braves have not done so, on top of obviously what he's shown during this time period. Is he's a volatile player, and when he's on a roll, he can be one of the best offensive players in baseball. He just had not done it for about 2 full seasons, so you really wondered if he still had it in the tank. And he's proved that he does. He is still, when he's doing things right, a really elite hitter, and maybe a little better in the clubhouse than we even thought he was. So this has kind of changed my mind a little bit on Ozuna. Now, it hasn't changed my mind in terms of, I think the Braves probably should have released him when he had the domestic violence stuff and the DUI. I think he should have been gone. I'm not naive to the fact that good players, or at least players with the capabilities that he has and his contract, more often than not, are not going to be released. If he'd been making league minimum and wasn't the type of player or had not shown the talent, he would have been gone. So I can bemoan that all I want, but it is reality. So he is on the team. I also am a big believer in forgiveness. I don't know if he has totally contrite or changed his life around. I really hope he has. That'd make me want to root for him a whole lot more. But that being said, hopefully he has done those things, and hopefully he can continue to help the Braves. And it'd be really cool if he could continue this all the way through. All that said, I think this changes, at least in my mind, where I see the future Marcell Ozuna with the Braves. I really thought when he was really struggling early on in the year, I thought the best case scenario would be for him to turn things around and regain some value for the Braves to be able to trade him at the trade deadline. And he's done more than that, right? He's turned it around and then some. And I think it's to the point where I find it very unlikely that the Braves are going to trade him. Remember, he has 1 year left on his contract after this year. I think now it's way more likely that the Braves are going to hold on to him and keep him through the end of his contract, and maybe just let it expire at that point. Maybe trade him, at the trade deadline next year if they really felt like it was the best thing for the team. But because he's so liked in the clubhouse and because he is hitting the way he is right now, I think he's going to be on the Braves at least for the duration of this season. It's shocking because 2 months ago I would never have said that. But things have changed a lot for Marcell Ozuna. All right, so with that, guys, let me move on to talk about the All-Star game a little bit. The All-Star game is coming up in mid-July, as always, and June 22nd is when the first phase of All-Star voting ends. So I want to go through first my choices of who I think should go to the early start in the All-Star game, and then I'm going to reveal to you, and you may have already seen this, but I'm going to reveal to you the top vote getters currently for the starters in the All-Star game. Again, this voting ends June 22nd, so this is just where it stands today. All right, so my selections. All right, guys. So first up, let's start with the American League. Actually, so first base, I have Yandy Diaz. He is the first baseman for Tampa Bay. He got up to a scorching hot start, and he's still playing really well. He hasn't hit as many home runs lately as he did early in the year, but he's having a career year for sure. So his current day totals for the season, he's batting .311 with 12 home runs, 34 RBIs, 953 OPS. So just a really good all-around year. And, of course, Tampa Bay themselves, they're just having a great season as a team. So Yandy Diaz might be having one of the best seasons of any of the Tampa Bay Rays. Seems like someone should be starting for the Rays. That being said, because it's a career year, I have wondered if it's a little bit of a flash in the pan. Maybe he starts just tailing off a little bit, especially with the home runs. He's always been about a 300 hitter, but the power is something that is kind of new to him. All right, then I have second base Marcus Semien, and he is batting .298, 9 home runs, 51 RBIs, and has a .855 OPS. He actually recently went through a long hitting streak, so his numbers have really gone way up with that. I think like a 25-game hitting streak, something like that. All right, third base, I have Jose Ramirez. Third base in the American League is really interesting because no one is really playing all that well. There's a lot of guys with very similar stats. So I just went with one of the guys that I honestly know is a star. I like Ramirez a lot generally. Matt Chapman was another name, but he had a scorching hot start as well and has really fallen off a lot lately. So I didn't go with him, even though he is a great player and especially a great defensive third baseman. But Ramirez is hitting .278, 10 home runs, 38 RBIs, 842 OPS. All right, shortstop, I have Bo Bichette. He's having a great year, .320, 14 home runs, 43 RBIs, 866 OPS. I think Bichette is kind of the clear choice. Corey Seager has really good numbers, but he missed a good chunk of time, so his counting stats aren't quite as high. But I could see him maybe overtaking Bichette if he just plays out of his mind over the last 2 months or 2 weeks. All right, at catcher, Adley Rutschman, of course, the young star catcher for the Orioles. He's hitting .274, 8 home runs, 28 RBIs, 800 OPS. There's not really a catcher in the American League either that's having a crazy awesome season. There's maybe 2 or 3 guys that are right around Rutschman's numbers, but he's kind of the new sexy name. So I kind of imagine that he's going to get the start. All right, in the outfield, I'm not going to go over the numbers because you guys know all these guys really well, and it's kind of obvious as long as they're healthy. Aaron Judge, now he's on the injured list right now, but I think he'll be back soon. Mike Trout and Yordan Alvarez these are my outfield. You could argue for Randy Arozarena instead of Mike Trout, but Mike Trout's getting voted in, even though he's having a little bit of a down year to his standards. I would prefer to see Trout out there. And then DH, of course, Shohei Ohtani. That's kind of a no-brainer there. He's having an awesome offensive season along with his pitching. So he's just ridiculous. We know that. All right, let's go over to the National League. So, or no, tell you what, let me go back through those names and tell you if I got these right, basically. So Yandy Diaz, no, he is not the leading vote getter. This was a little surprising to me, but Vlad Guerrero Jr. Is first, even though he doesn't have quite the statistics as Diaz right now. He has the name. I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this. And I mean, I like Guerrero a lot. So, you know, and this is, by the way, the closest race in terms of the numbers. They're only a few thousand votes away from each other. So I think it may just come down to who has the better last couple weeks going into the break. Marcus Semien is the top vote getter in the AL. Jose Ramirez is not even in the top 5 for third baseman. So I didn't get that one right. Or maybe they didn't get it right, and I did. But I think that just shows you how closely packed all of the third basemen are. Jose Ramirez, by the way, I think a lot of these votes, you know, happened right when the voting started. He's had the last 2 weeks have been really good for him. And so maybe that's not reflected in the vote. And Matt Chapman is the leading vote getter right now at third base. And he, like I said, he's gone downhill the last couple weeks, but had a great start to the season. So I think that's what's reflected there in that vote. Bo Bichette is first for shortstops. Corey Seager is second, but it's not a very close vote. So I kind of expect Bo Bichette to get this one. Adley Rutschman is first at catcher. And then I got basically all of these other guys correct. Aaron Judge first, Mike Trout, Yordan Alvarez, and Shohei Ohtani are all leading vote getters for the American League for outfield and DH. All right, so let's go ahead and go over to the National League. And again, I'll give you my vote first, and then we'll go back through who's leading. So first base, Freddie Freeman. You guys know, even though he left us, I do love Freddie Freeman. He is having a great season. 333 average, 12 home runs, 43 RBIs, and 890 OPS. Oh, by the way, I meant to, these numbers are maybe 1 day old, so I apologize, because I think Freddie actually hit a home run last night. So if my numbers are a little off, give me a break. Okay. All right. So Freddie Freeman, 333, 12 home runs, 43 RBIs, 980 OPS. I think him and Acuna, by the way, are probably 1 and 2 either way. Probably Acuna 1 in terms of the National League MVP race at this point in the season. So having another great season, Freddie Freeman. Second base, Luis Arraez. He is, of course, hitting 403 right now. And I think if you're hitting over 400, you're probably getting a start in the All-Star game. He has almost no power. He's only hit 1 home run, 30 RBIs, but he does have a 943 OPS. So when you're hitting 400, you're going to have a pretty high OPS no matter what. But anyways, I did pick him over Ozzy. Obviously Ozzy's had a nice little run here. He's had some home runs. I think he's probably second to Arraez, and I think he probably gets an All-Star bid no matter what. But I did pick Arraez over Ozzy. That one kind of hurt me, but I did do that. Third base, I did pick Austin Riley. This one's a really tough one, similar to the American League third baseman. I don't know what it is about third baseman this year, but nobody's having a super great season. We know that Riley had some struggles, but he's kind of come on a little bit lately. But him and Arenado are probably your 2 best choices, and their numbers are incredibly similar. So Riley's numbers, again, these might be about a day old. 272, 11 home runs, 33 RBIs, and a 793 OPS. I can see people choosing Arenado just simply for the defense over Riley if their numbers are similar. This is one where I think if Riley has a great stretch of games, he could maybe edge out Arenado. If they're about the same in terms of stats, Arenado's probably going to get it, guys. But it is a close vote. Riley's only about 40,000 votes behind Arenado at this point. All right, shortstop. Orlando Arcia is my choice. I had to go back and forth. I had to check myself. Am I being a homer here? But honestly, no other shortstop in the National League is having a very good year. Orlando picked a very good year to have his career season, and he's done a lot for the Braves. And how honestly hilarious would it be the Braves let Swanson go and Arcia ends up being an all-star and Dansby Swanson is not. Pretty interesting, at least to think about. But yeah, Arcia ultimately was my choice. He's hitting .322, 5 home runs, 19 RBIs, .854 OPS, and those counting stats might be the only thing that keep him out of the game. And even then, again, if you compare him to other shortstops, he's having a great season. And the only reason those counting stats are lower, of course, you guys know, is he missed about 3 weeks of the season. All right, catcher, I have Sean Murphy. I'm not being a homer, guys. I don't think I'm being a homer. He's hitting .285, 12 home runs, 42 RBIs, .930 OPS. Now, offensively, it is a very close call between him and Will Smith, but we know that Sean Murphy is just an awesome defensive catcher on top of having a great offensive first half, great defensive catcher. So I'm picking Sean Murphy. All right, and then my outfield. Of course, Ronald Acuna, he's having a just awesome, historic season. .333, 13 home runs, 37 RBIs, a .972 OPS. Then I picked Mookie Betts, who is actually a little bit of a down year in terms of his average, .264, but still a lot of power with 17 home runs, 41 RBIs, and a .903 OPS. And then my third outfielder, this one is a little more interesting, but with the Braves coming off of playing Arizona and getting to see Corbin Carroll, not in person, but with my own eyes, I'm going Corbin Carroll. The numbers kind of back it up. He's hitting .308, 13 home runs, 33 RBIs, and .968 OPS. That is quite remarkable. So that's my choice. And then at DH, I have JD Martinez, the veteran with the Dodgers. He's having a bounce back season. So let's go through these guys and see who got top vote, or at least who's getting top vote right now for the All-Star game for the National League. So Freddie Freeman is number one, and considering the kind of season he's having, there's no other first baseman that is having this level of production. I mean, you can look at Pete Alonso and the home runs, but he really doesn't compare in any other category. So I think Freddie is pretty safe in getting this as long as he can avoid injury and that sort of thing. Second base, Luis Ariz is the leading vote getter. Ozzie Albies is second, but he's a good ways off. Austin Riley is not the leading vote getter right now. He's 40,000 votes shy of Nolan Arenado. Riley always is going to have to go up against Arenado, and Arenado simply has the name recognition beyond Riley, even though people certainly should know who Austin Riley is by now. But I think he does still have a shot. Just like last year, if you remember, he caught fire in late June, and maybe he's doing it again. That would be really cool to see. I still think even if he doesn't get the start, Riley has a decent shot at making the team. Guys, Orlando Arcia is the leading vote getter right now for shortstops in the National League. Can you believe that? It's crazy. I mean, there are some really big names. I mean, Lindor, Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson, big names at shortstop in the National League. None of them are having great first halves. And so Orlando Arcia, I mean, he's hitting .322, and he's playing solid defense. So if he continues to hit, I think he's going to get there. Now he's playing above what he's ever done in his career. So is he going to continue to do it? I don't know, but it would be pretty sweet if he made the All-Star team, especially as a starter. Sean Murphy is the leading vote getter at catcher right now. It is a pretty close race between him and Will Smith, but again, if he continues to do what he's doing, I think he's going to get it. Look, I will say too, Braves fans come out and vote when Braves are playing well. they get voted into the All-Star game. I really appreciate that about Braves fans. All right, outfield. Ronald Acuna is not only the top outfield vote getter, but he's the top overall vote getter right now, and he certainly deserves that, guys. Mookie Betts is also scheduled to be a starter in the All-Star game at this point. Now, the only outfielder I didn't get or that's different from my vote is Lourdes Gurriel. So it's interesting that Arizona does have an outfielder in at this point, but it's a different outfielder. I think Carroll's having a better season. Gurriel is having a career year himself. Maybe the Gurriel name has some weight. I'm not sure, but that kind of surprised me that he would be voted over Corbin Carroll. But those last few outfielders in the National League, it's a pretty close call, so we'll see on that one. And then J.D. Martinez is the leading vote getter at DH. I was surprised Jorge Soler was not closer. He's near the top of the league in home runs and is having a pretty good year himself, but he's a few actually places behind J.D. Martinez. Now, of course, we know that pitchers don't get voted in as starters, but I will just mention the Braves have a few pitchers that I think could make the team as well. Bryce Elder and Spencer Strider are your most likely starters to make the team. Unfortunately, they both have had some not great starts recently. That might bump them a little bit, but Strider particularly, his strikeout numbers are so great. If he bounces back and especially off of that weird Mets start that he had, I think he's going to be in. I'm hoping Bryce Elder can bounce back and be really good and make it as well, because it'd be a great story for him. And the other one that's starting to get some pub, at least in Braves circles, is Jesse Chavez. He's had a remarkable stretch run. I talked about it in my last podcast episode, and I just wanted to mention him. I think it's really unlikely that he makes the team, but he's having a career year, and maybe if we can, pump him up enough, somebody in Major League Baseball will pay attention and he can make the team. I think if he just continued to be lights out and didn't allow, let's say he doesn't allow a run for the next couple of weeks, then maybe he makes the team. I mean, it's within the realm of possibility. It's just really unlikely for a guy who's not a closer and not even a primary setup man to make the All-Star team. All right, guys. Well, that being said, let's move on from the All-Star game and the vote and just preview briefly the Braves taking on the Tigers in the next 3 games. The Braves right now sit at 40-25, whereas the Tigers are at 26-37. They're certainly not the worst team in the American League, but they're not a very good team either. I think the Braves are coming off a series against the Nationals. Tigers are probably a very similar team, at least in terms of record, to the Nationals. The Tigers, what I want to get across especially, they have a really bad offense. They rank dead last in runs scored in all of baseball, and they rank dead last in slugging percentage. So not only are they not scoring runs, they're not impacting the ball very much. The Braves are, in contrast, 5th in runs scored in Major League Baseball and 2nd in slugging percentage. So on paper, these two offenses could not be further apart, and hopefully that shows up in games. The Tigers, back to the pitching side of things, are 21st in the league in team ERA and 30th in home runs per 9. I'm obviously just picking out a few things to look at, but things that I think could really impact the series. The Braves, on the other hand, are 7th in baseball in team ERA and 5th in home runs per 9 innings. So if the Braves are if they're able to hit some home runs against a fairly mediocre Tigers pitching staff, I think there's no way that the Tigers are going to be able to keep up. We know that in some of these games on paper, I mean, we remember Oakland. We just lost a game to the Nationals. Sometimes what looks like on paper a sure thing in baseball doesn't happen. It's a funny game like that. So as they say, you got to play the game. But I think if the Braves can limit base runners for the Tigers and make sure that they're not stringing multiple hits together, the Tigers are very unlikely to score much in this series, which would be a really good thing for the Braves, because remember, Braves pitchers have not had a quality start in quite a while. It would be awesome if Charlie Morton, who goes in game 1 of this series, could set a tone early, shut down the Tigers. He could have a good start. And man, all three starts in this series, it would be great if they could be quality starts and get that pitching staff rolling just as the offense has been rolling for the Braves. So the pitching matchups for this series, game one is Morton versus a guy named TBD, to be determined. It's kind of weird that these teams play in a few hours and we don't know the starting pitcher for the Tigers. Maybe that means it will be a bullpen game for them. I'm not sure. In game two, Spencer Strider is going to take on Olson. Olson is a 23-year-old rookie. He's only pitched 2 games this season. So he's been pretty good in those 2 games, but of course it doesn't give you much to go on. So we'll see on that one. He might be kind of talented as a rookie coming up, but I really don't know too much on that. I'm more focused on Spencer Strider. Especially, I'm interested in seeing his fastball command and velocity be back up to par. You guys know in that Mets series, his velocity and his command of his fastball were really oddly poor, at least by his standards. So it'd be good to see him getting back to maybe whatever tweaks he needs to make mechanically or whatever the case may be. We need Spencer Strider to be dominant. He is the most fun pitcher to watch in baseball when he is on. And then game 3, Smith Shawver is making his second start this season versus Lorenzen. Lorenzen is a solid pitcher. He's got about a 4 ERA for the Tigers this year. He might be the best pitcher the Braves will face this series, so we'll just obviously have to see how they go after him. But on paper, guys, again, this series sets up really well for the Braves. If they don't take 2 out of 3, I'd say it's a bit of a disappointment, especially the way the Braves have been playing lately. Again, the bats were a little silent in the National Series, so it would be good for them to bounce back. And the starting pitching, this is the time that I think they could really start getting back to where they want to be and making some quality starts and shutting down the Tigers. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to watching them, guys. I really appreciate you listening to this episode of State of the Braves. I will talk to you guys soon.